Okay, hi everybody. Welcome along today to our session on enabling innovation through micro enterprises. Thank you for registering for this session. And for those who haven't been able to make it today, this is also available on demand. So hopefully at some point you find this in the on-demand section of Chamara and Anthosa's web page, and you're able to check out what today's session is about because it's going to be pretty interesting. Before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I am on. This 1 hour session comes to you where I am, which is on Wurundjeri country in Naarm, which is also known as Melbourne. And I would like to, as we launch into this, acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land that we are on today, perhaps the land where you're from as well. And as I mentioned, I'm on Wurundjeri land, but I would like to acknowledge that I work, play, rest, and create on these lands. And I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and also anyone who's online with us today or is of Aboriginal or Torres Strait ancestry. So I acknowledge these ancient and amazing connections to land, sea, and waters, and thank them for taking care of the land that I come from today. So moving along, who else do we have on this call or this webinar today? We have two experts and me, who I am the facilitator. And who am I? My name is Emma Donnelly. I'm your MC or facilitator today. And I'm the owner of a business called Comm-it, Communication and Training Solutions. So what does that actually mean? It means I'm mainly a soft skills trainer. And I know we don't give enough attention to soft skills these days. So as a soft skills trainer, I tend to help professionals with their skills to help them get a big impact in what they do in their work life. Because if you increase your soft skills and improve them, it can make a really big difference to your work life, your career, and even your personal life. So if you find it tricky to speak to your peers or translate things to your colleagues or anything like that, that's the sort of space I work in. I'm also known as something called a science communicator. And that basically means that I translate science, technology, IT, engineering, maths, all those different areas of STEM, we call them. And I'm able to take those complex topics and turn them into everyday English for people who perhaps don't have strength in those particular subject areas. So I help scientists, researchers, technical experts, people with very strong expertise to throw out their jargon, understand a bit more about storytelling, and then work out who their audience is so that they can really improve in the way not only they communicate, but maybe if you're presenting at something or if you need help with your LinkedIn posts or anything like that. So that's where I work. It's really important these days. It's always been an important skill to have, but it's becoming more important, especially with the introduction and kind of the fast proliferation of AI that's happening all over the world right now. Because the more AI out there, the less we're connecting with real humans, and humans love working with humans. So if you can get your human skills up there, you will always win over AI. So please consider upskilling. It's a really important thing to do. Now we have another two experts on the call here today on the webinar. We have Chamara, who is the CEO and founder of Anthosa Consulting. You may have seen him before on a lot of these webinars. These are his baby, and he's very good at arranging and organising the experts. So his company, Anthosa Consulting, is a fast-thinking global strategy company that consults to help organisations in today's fast-changing and digital world. He has over 25 years experience in a range of areas, but these days specialises in designing operating models with the power of AI, using data analytics and modern technologies to drive innovation and deliver measurable results. So at the core of the work that his organisation does, Anthosa Consulting, is mainly around Transformation 2.0 philosophy. And if you're not sure what that is, you don't need to worry. We'll be getting into that a little bit later. And he likes a human-centered, sustainable approach to innovation that then aligns with the technology, the people, and the data and the processes within your organisation. So it's a very structured and bespoke consultancy that he offers. And by embracing the principles of Transformation 2.0, he's also able, apologies, to empower teams to adapt to change, drive innovation, and deliver meaningful business outcomes. So he's got some pretty good stats on what he does, and he's going to share those later to give you a bit of an idea about what he does in his business and how it can actually help your business or your organization. And then next we have Simone from Italy, who's up extremely early today. I think it's I don't even know if the sun's come up. I think it's like 4:30 or 5:30. It's very early. He's the co-founder and CEO of a company called Boundaryless. And a quick glance at his LinkedIn profile today, and you'll probably see that Simone is a bit of an entrepreneur. So he has a lot of balls in the air, and he is a very innovative and creative human. Simone focuses on open business models, ecosystem organizations, and platforms. And he's worked on these topics in contexts such as emergent, self-managed organizations, and also startups. But he also works with very large institutions too, which can range from Fortune 500 to the UN. So some pretty big names there. In 2013, as a result of his experience with open and systemic business models, Simone created the first fully open source methodology for platform and ecosystems thinking called the Platform Design Toolkit, an approach that effectively contributed to kickstart a new design domain. And now it accounts for more than 70,000 practitioners all over the world. So as you can see, we have two very interesting experts with us today, and we're going to hear from both of them. But to begin with, let's just have a quick overview of what we're expecting. So I'm just going to overview the context and challenges just to set up for our experts. Then we have Simone talking about his platform operating model and explaining what that is and why it's important to organizations. We then have Chamara talking about Anthosa's story to add a bit of context to how it can work, and then using his Transformation 2.0 methodology that he understands and uses to then work out how it can actually work in your organization or other operating systems. Throughout the whole session, we do have space for question and answers at the end. So if you're online and you have a question, one of the benefits of being live in these things is you actually get to ask the questions. So I'll ask that down the bottom there in the Zoom, you can see Q&A, and if you can drop your questions into there, we'll make sure that they're got to at the end of the session and that they're answered. And if there's anything that we can't answer, or if we run out of time, we'll make sure we get back to you with those responses. So please do make use of that question and answer section, and I'll be keeping an eye on that for you today. We'd also like you to stick around till the end, because at the very end, we have quite a few giveaways to share with you, and some of those have time limitations and number limitations on it. So by turning up today, you're able to make sure you actually get some of those giveaways that other people may not have the option to grab. Okay. So I think that's us for today. What we're moving on to next is I'm going to give you a bit of context about what's stifling business growth at the moment. And what has been said in a McKinsey report back in 2010 was that 87% of executives sort of say that innovation is essential for their organizations for success and growth. And some of the stuff I'm going to explain to you now seems really intuitive and obvious, but sometimes you do need the data to back up that information so you know you're on the right track. So innovation is really essential for organizations to be able to grow and to be successful. And what holds back innovation? Well, apparently it's things like, especially in large organizations, and I'm sure if you've worked in a large organization, you'll realize that it's the bureaucratic bottlenecks, it's the slow decision-making, it's the all of these sorts of things really slow us down, find it quite difficult to get things done, and they end up stifling that innovation and that creativity that a lot of more, I guess, innovative creative types really enjoy. So that bureaucracy can really have a massive impact on your organization's innovation, but then also success. So what we've also discovered, and it can be shown through the stats, is that companies that streamline operating models to reduce this bureaucratic lockup and increase the potential that innovation can have, also have 33% higher customer satisfaction and 34% faster product development. So if your organisation is into product development, then really you can't ignore this information. And it basically comes down to, if we distill it all down, less bureaucracy equals more innovation. And while I think we all know that in our intuitively, it's good to actually know it's been measured by some people as well. So the question today is, what's stopping your particular organisation from making the shift? And perhaps your organisation at the moment is doing okay. Perhaps you want to think about where your next organisation is going to be. Or perhaps you're here because your organisation isn't working too well and you can see that things are starting to go a little bit wrong and you need some advice and some understanding about how you could potentially have a different model that will actually really allow you guys to thrive. Okay, so let's talk about what a boundaryless organisation actually is, because this is a little bit of jargon here. And what does that mean? I mean, we can say it's breaking free from bureaucracy, but unless we actually understand what a boundaryless organisation is, it's going to be a little bit tricky to all be on the same page. So there's 4 types of boundaries in this model that talks about boundaryless organisations. And each of those 4 boundaries, the aim is to reduce each of these so that there is less of a boundary, less of a barrier between each of them. So the 4 types of boundaries are, if we start up the top there on my left, is vertical. And so this is considered a traditional hierarchical structure. So reducing management layers allows people to travel freely through the organisation, and new initiatives can be implemented without necessarily needing managers who could stifle that innovation. So we're aiming here for something called a healthy hierarchy, or a hierarchy or a flat or more flat organisation, or something that allows more free flowing between management layers. Next along, we have horizontal boundaries. So what does that mean? They're the functional separation, which can include departments and other silos. So by removing these horizontal boundaries, ideas can be shared and implemented cross-functionally. And I don't know about you, but I have worked in several places that are both very hierarchical and also have those real horizontal boundaries as well, and not much seems to happen across them. We then have external, which is down the bottom there, and external considers the separation within the value chain. So by working closely with customers and suppliers, implementing innovations are more effective and can be more effective. And then finally, we have the geographical boundaries, and this is probably for much larger organisations, but this refers to the separation between countries or geographies, and in a specific form of horizontal separation. So by integrating different geographies, innovations will spread more easily amongst the organisation and can be implemented faster. So a boundaryless organisation is an organisation that effectively removes these boundaries to innovation, making it less hierarchical and having less functional separation, and it's all more integrated as a whole. And this allows for free information flow, free ideas, and for innovation, which is what we're all after on today's session. There are a bunch of characteristics associated with these types of organisations, but I'm not going to go into those too deeply because we have the experts on the call today. And there are a lot of advantages, such as increased performance, agility, flexibility, and innovation potential. And it also has not just advantages for the organisation, but it also has advantages for an employee too. So keep in mind, this isn't just about organisations, this is about the humans within these organisations and allowing them to thrive in the space they're in. There are a couple of disadvantages, because all models have advantages and disadvantages, but main disadvantage is it can be pretty tricky to implement sometimes, and some particular types of industries may not suit this model. But as I said, we have Chamara and Simone today to go through where it won't work. Or if you've got a question about your particular organisation, you can throw that into the question and answer. So today we're going to find about what this model is, and then how you can create it within all your organisation. But just to give you a bit of an example, you can see some logos up there on the screen as well, and some examples of some boundaryless organisations that you may wish to look into a little bit further Gore, who was a particular type of product fabric that we all probably have heard of, which is Gore-Tex. So this company, W.L. Gore and Associates, was founded in 1958. It's an American private multinational. And as I said, it's best known for its Gore-Tex fabrics, which are waterproof and breathable. It's a good fabric membrane. They're often used in like hiking clothes or camping clothes or outdoors sort of materials. You've probably seen them or come in contact with them if you hang out in that space. They're also used in footwear sometimes. And the company is distinctive for its organizational structure, which is famously non-hierarchical and lattice-like rather than traditional. It operates with a flat organizational structure where teams form organically around projects and initiatives. And the structure is designed to foster innovation, quick decision-making, and a high level of employee engagement. And as someone who's been an employee, I really like the idea of employee engagement. Then we move down to Valve, which is the second one down there in red. And they're known as Valve Corporation or Valve Software. You might have heard of them. They were founded in 1996, and they're a well-known video game developer and digital distribution company. And I'm not a gamer, so I'm no expert in this, but they have created games such as Half-Life. So this is a unique corporate structure, once again, with a flat management approach. With this flat structure, employees decide what to work on themselves. They develop games through playtesting and iteration, describing game design as a kind of experimental psychology. By 2012, keeping in mind it was founded in 96, Valve employed around 250 people and was reportedly worth over $3 billion US. And this structure has allowed the company to adapt quickly to changes, which is important in the market, especially in the gaming market, which is a fast-moving industry. Our final example today is HeYi, which we've probably all heard of. I know I have a couple of appliances in my house by HeYi. They're a Chinese multinational that were initially founded in 1920 as a fridge manufacturer only. If you're Australian and you like sport, you might have seen them recently as a major sponsor of the Australian Open tennis tournament. But they also have quite an interesting story. So starting in the 1920s, they weren't considered, they kind of nearly went down the tube in the 1980s because the factory owed millions in debt and suffered from debilitated infrastructure, poor management, and lack of quality controls. Production had slowed, and they were rarely producing more than 80 refrigerators a month, and the factory was going to close due to bankruptcy. So it was not in a particularly good way. However, around 2009, things started to, probably a bit before that, things started to improve. And HeYi actually overtook Whirlpool, another appliance manufacturer, in 2009 to become the fourth largest refrigerator producer in terms of sales globally, with a market share of 6.3%. So going from, nearly down the tube to that was a pretty impressive turnaround. And they've also been a major brand, #1 brand globally in major appliances for over 12 consecutive years, starting in 2009. But I'm not going to give you much more about them because I believe that one of our speakers will be speaking about them much more in detail shortly, which now brings me to our next speaker. Oh, before that, I'll just go, HeYi is connected to Boundaryless, which is Simone, and he's going to talk about how he's connected to that company and the work he's done with them. And then Boundaryless are really good at, they have the platform operating model, which is the one we're going to find out more about. They've developed this model, and this is the work that they do today. We then have Chamara from Anthosa who'll be speaking, and his expertise fits in where it becomes to, you've got this model, but then how do you integrate it into your organization and make sure it works properly? So his organization, his consulting company, actually helps your organization implement these within your organization. So we have HeYi, which is the example. We have Boundaryless, who is the amazing Simone, who's going to speak in a second, who has developed the model. And then we have Anthosa, who are involved in implementing and helping integrate that model into your organizations. So I'd now like to introduce Simone, the CEO of Boundaryless. And as a reminder, as we go through, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section. Simone is going to speak for about 10 or so minutes, and then he'll move directly on to Chamara, who will then go through those other 2 points, which is how Anthosa are actually using this model and then how they've helped other people implement it into their organizations. So may I hand over to you, please, Simone?
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. Let me just take the floor and introduce you to the platform operating model. Next slide, please. So thank you so much again, and I want to give you a little bit of an overview in terms of what's our story at Boundaryless and how we got to this collaboration with RenDanHeYi that Emma was talking about. Boundaryless was born in 2018, essentially after a few years after I created the platform design toolkit, which is one of the toolkits that we use to essentially run most of our interventions with companies. It's a Creative Commons tool. Essentially, it was the first methodology that was formalized for companies and teams to develop, I would say, platform strategies more generally, but more specifically very focused on digital products and like marketplaces or developer ecosystems. And it's been 10 years out there, or more actually, 12. And as Emma was saying, it's been used by tons of people, almost 100,000 at this point, and has been integrated in many design thinking practices in companies such as IBM or ING or Farfetch and many, many more, the UN. Since 2020, 2019, 20, I've got in touch with a higher group because they were interested in the work we were doing in platforms and ecosystems, and their organizational model, the RenDanHeYi, that it's quite a famous management practice, I would say, all over the world. Has been on the HBR as a case countless times. Was pretty much an organizational model that embraced platform and ecosystems thinking very deeply. Indeed, RenDanHeYi defines itself an ecosystem brand. And yeah, basically we started a process. I will talk about this in a minute, but essentially started a process to bring platforms and ecosystem thinking into the organizational and operating model, inspired by RenDanHeYi, but also by other operating models. Companies such as even Amazon has some principle of platform thinking in how it operates. And in the last 10 years, we have been working, worldwide with many brands on these topics as advisors to boards, CPOs, CTOs, organizational developer, and much more. Next slide. These are the toolkits that we have. Actually, it's two toolkits, not just one. If you see on the left, there is the platform design toolkit that, as I mentioned, is more apt for designing platform product strategies. So whenever you need to design a marketplace or any digital product, I would say at the moment, because the network, the internet is so pervasive that nowadays it's silly to think that anything that you develop digitally, it's not a platform. No? Everything is at the end of the day. And then on the right, you can see the 3EO toolkit. 3EO toolkit, it's a way to let's say synthesize entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling toolkit, which means essentially that you develop organizations that are very much focused on the ecosystem that they enable. They are very entrepreneurial, and yeah, the 3O, it's our, let's say, our methodology for platform operating models, and it's inspired by RenDanHeYi and co-developed by RenDanHeYi Group. Of course, you can use both toolkits together to build an organization that is a platform organization and building products that connect with each other as an ecosystem of products. Next slide. So essentially, the need for a platform organization is due to, I would say, two major facts. First is that the market is demanding optionality, right? So the market, this article on the right that you can see is from the HBR. It was from 2023, if I'm not wrong. And it makes a great job of explaining, it does a great job of explaining essentially what are the key strategic drivers for creating organizations that can generate diverse outcomes and really be adaptable. Essentially, the message here is market is changing. You need to be it's no more enough, let's say, for firms to develop specific products and specific options, but instead they need to be able to produce a multiplicity of ideas and options, and they need to be able to adapt their strategies quickly and essentially thrive in a reality which is much more dynamic, unpredictable, and also made of a plethora of niches. So the idea is market is demanding multiplicity of products, no more monolithic product strategies. And so the question is, how do you adapt your organization to be able to do so, to create these multiplicity of go-to-market strategies, ideas, products, and distribute also the autonomy in the organization to do so. Next slide. So we know from since the very end of the 60s, actually, that organizations pretty much ship their org chart. This is an article from Mel Conway, who is famous essentially for his so-called Conway law, which clearly states that any organization that designs a system, like a product, for example, or a system of products, will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organizational communication structure. So you can imagine that if you have a monolithic organization, like a top-down specific functional organization, what you're going to create is going to be monolithic, top-down, specific, and I would say very singular. So the question shifts to how do we organize if we want to create optionality, if we want to create a multiplicity of solutions, if we want to create a multiplicity of go-to-market structure. Next slide. In the pictures in the slide, you can see three organizational models. The ones on the left are the ones that most of you listening to the video or webinar will be probably used to work within. The first on the top is so-called functional organization. And as you can see, whenever you have a project or it can be, for example, a new product, you really need to put together a lot of people from across the board, and you need to really cross many boundaries, as Emma was saying, right? So you really have to cross boundaries horizontally in the organization, and it's really hard if the organization is not organized for that. On the bottom left, you can see the typical implementation of what we call the matrix organization, where essentially the organization remains functional largely, but you have these cross-functional agreements that are not dynamic. It's not a project. It's I mean, it can be a project, but it's not, I would say, something you create on the go. Rather, these are structures that you overimpose over a functional structure. So you end up with an organization which has two structures overimposed one onto another, and people often confused on who they report to, what are their priorities, So I would say that matrix organizations have been useful in the last decades to overcome the limits that are inherent in a functional organization. But the reality is that to really embrace the possibilities and opportunities of the 21st century, you really need a different organizational model, which is the one on the right, or so-called platform organization. Next slide. So the platform organization is pretty much a way to, as you can see from the image, to separate, let's say, to unbundle the organization into smaller nodes and facilitate dynamic interactions between these nodes. So typically in an implementation of a platform organization, we have a few key concepts. I don't want to go too much into the details into this presentation. Of course, if you want to know more, you can reach out, you can read some of our articles. But essentially, you have a structure which is based on so-called microenterprises, which are, let's say, the equivalent of product units, product service units. So units that have their own value proposition, they create a singular piece of service or product which is independent and can be consumed quite independently. Then they leverage, as you can see from the arrows, from the remains of the functional capabilities of the organization, which normally, by the way, in a platform organization are called shared service platforms, which essentially standardize common services and clarify also how they are provided to the microenterprises through service contracts, which are very clear, SLAs, and so on. And then you have a few other artifacts in the platform organization. Essentially, one is certainly the contract. So whatever used to be a top-down management structure or bureaucratic agreements, in the platform organization, it becomes a contract. So it becomes a way for nodes to agree on what they bring on the table. For example, if they need to create a new product together, they can share the resources, they can agree on who gets the benefits, how the benefits are distributed, like revenues or equity of a new product, and so on. And you can also have similar contracts between the board or sometimes intermediary structures that are called industry platforms, essentially sectorial kind of sector optimized board extensions, essentially. And they can invest into new microenterprises or existing microenterprises looking for capital or operating expenses as well to develop new stuff, new ideas, new products. So you have an organization that at the end of the day becomes a little bit more similar to a market internally, and the organization itself embraces a lot of principles of capital allocation, like venture building and things like that. So it becomes like a market-based venture builder, which, as you can imagine, is radically more dynamic and more adaptive than typical functional organization. Of course, we will see in a minute that it comes with some challenges, but essentially, for example, the major challenge you can have is coherence. And there are some policies and techniques you can use to increase coherence. For example, as you can see here, we have portfolio and taxonomies that are tools that you can use to increment the coherence of the system. So, for example, when we work with platform organizations, often we create these common ways to describe products, taxonomies that help these macro enterprises to create puzzle-like products that connect with each other. But I'm going long, so let's move on. Next slide, please. So the major effect of these is that you end up with an organization that has much more connection with the customer, can generate much more customer insights, and is generally much more adaptive. Next slide. Finally, last bit. Of course, this is very useful to normally apply, for example, to organizations which have a lot of organizational debt. So, for example, organizations that have grown bureaucratic over time, or often we work with organizations that have gone through M&As, for example, where they have a lot of duplications, overlaps, products that don't fit with each other very well. It's really good to reduce your time to market, enhance, of course, the capability that the organization has to upsell and cross-sell coherent set of products, because essentially the problem here is you have to develop multiple products in this present on the market. So the question is rather, it's not really should I do that or not? It's more about, how do we do it coherently? How do we do it in a way that keeps together autonomy and independence of the units together with a coherent set of products. So that's what we do with platform organization model. Thank you so much for having me again. And Chamara, floor goes to you.
Thanks, Simone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Anthosa has adopted the platform operating model for our own ways of working and how we structure ourselves. But after that, I'll also go into the Transformation 2.0 philosophy and how actually large organizations can use the platform operating model as a way to try and become more innovative and how they can go through that transformation itself. So let me start with the story of how we have adopted the platform operating model for ourselves. So when Anthosa got started in 2018, we had a customer that came to us and said, they wanted to create this innovation strategy, because what they had been doing is they've been trying to do innovation for a while, and they realized that it was becoming more of innovation theater. People are going through the motions, trying to create things, but it wasn't really driving a lot of value. So they came to us and said, look, they wanted to be a little bit more structured, and also at the same time have a way to try and measure innovation, have a way to try and speed up the experimentation and look at how they can go through the processes quicker, and also have a good structured way of funding innovation, right? So they came to us and said, this was a challenge that they're dealing with, and it was a past client that had worked with me in the past before I started Anthosa, and then they knew me as somebody who is a bit of an out of the box thinker, and so they came to me and said, is this something you could help us with? So I said, yeah, of course, it sounds like an interesting challenge. So let's have a go. And to me, obviously, having a customer that's willing to innovate with us, that's like the ideal situation that you can be in, right? So we went through the process and we looked at, in terms of value creation, in terms of their business model, what's their business model and how do they create value? How do they capture value, right? And then we codified into what we call the value model design. We looked at, what are the elements of value that they create in the organization, in terms of the economic value or the value that they add to the community, or in terms of the social value, or it could be the value that they add to the planet in terms of the planetary value, right? So to the environment, right? So we created that value model design to talk about how they create value and capture value. And then we looked at, in terms of the investment and the decision making, in terms of how they want to make a call on whether to persevere with the innovation or whether to pivot in terms of the direction, right? And for us, the value assessment framework was key to this. So we looked at the value assessment framework in terms of what were the dimensions in the value model, and where do we understand the value assessment being happening in the innovation process. Are they getting better understanding of the customer, or are they getting a better understanding of how the product needs to evolve, or what's the aspect, right? And also at the same time we looked at the experimentation design. How do they go to rapid experimentation in terms of selecting a small group of customers and testing their product concepts with them and getting some input, right? So we codified that as the experimentation design process. But we also realized when innovation teams start to work on things, the way they work is a little bit different to a traditional sort of the more mature organizations operate. You need for them to be a lot more agile and nimble and sort of be much leaner in terms of their thinking and how they operate. So we actually created these ways of working for the innovation teams to adopt. And we also looked at how they fund innovation is different to how they fund the existing projects and programs, because the existing projects and programs have clearly defined ROI that they need to look at. Whereas for innovation, sometimes the ROI doesn't really stack up. I actually spoke about this a little while back in one of our other webinars before. Like for innovation, you can't actually almost use ROI as a metric. Instead, you need to look at ROV, return on value, right? So what's the value we are creating, right? So the funding model that we created was actually something that enabled them to look at what's that value created and do we have a good way of measuring that, right? And then do we have a good way of making a decision using the value assessment framework on whether to keep investing in this idea or whether to give it completely scrap it or whether to change direction for this. And so funding model and the value assessment framework work together in enabling that decision. Right? And then we looked at in terms of the tools. Yes, the teams. This was back in 2018. The world hadn't become the fully remote world that happened during the COVID, but we still realized some of the teams that were working with them actually needed to be engaging with the work they're doing remotely. So we actually adopted some of the tools that enable that remote collaboration. Right? So tool support was another aspect that we looked at as part of the innovation strategy. So we looked through this, and the customer was quite happy with what we co-designed with them. And a lot of this strategy was actually co-designed with them. So we didn't do it for them. We actually designed it with them. Right? So they had a really good shared understanding. But what they also said was the thinking that we brought in here was quite pushing the boundaries. And they said, we kind of need a little bit of help to actually implement this strategy. Can you help us with it? And then I said, yes, of course we can. And then we actually brought in 3 more senior consultants to work alongside me. And we had team number 1 for Anthosa and the client. And in terms of the implementation, it was actually a joint team that implemented the strategy. Not just Anthosa, it was Anthosa and the client working together as a team. But then this created Anthosa Pod 1, what we call Pod 1, right? So we had a small team that's built around me that was essentially able to do innovation strategy and help implement innovation strategy for customers. Right? And this was in 2018, and then shortly after in 2020, just going into COVID, another customer that came into us and said, this AI thing is really taking off. We really think we need to be looking at this. And then our teams have been doing a bit of experimentation and trying to adopt AI in different parts of the business, but we really don't have a lot of structure around how we want to do this. And also there's a lot of confusing messaging in the market, right? And the vendors are pushing a lot of their wares and saying, this is their way of implementing AI, and that's the only way. And we really need somebody to help navigate through this complexity. And they said, is this AI strategy something you could help us with? And then of course we said yes. And then we said, oh yeah, by the way, like when you look at the AI strategy in terms of how you go through the adoption, it's a lot similar to innovation, because a lot of the AI adoption is actually new innovation that you're driving in organization to whether transform an existing process or to actually create a new process around using AI, right? So we looked at a lot of the IP that we had built in the innovation strategy around the value model design, the value assessment framework, ways of working, funding model, and we said, yeah, a lot of this is actually reusable. We can actually reuse and just do a little bit of redesign around how we are going to talk about in terms of the value creation, right? But then we looked at the experimentation design and tool support. Those areas were actually a lot more reusable. So we said, yes, we can actually straight away reuse them, right? But then we also realized with AI, there's these 2 elements of AI ethics and data governance, and the data platforms and the AI analytics platforms that's coming in. These were actually completely new areas that we had to look at. So we work with the customers to actually understand, what do they need in the organization in terms of the ethics and governance around AI and data, right? We co-designed that with them, and obviously with the platforms for data model and the AI analytics platform, we again co-designed with them. So we created the strategy again, because we co-designed, the customer had a really strong shared understanding of it. But then again, they said, they needed a little bit of help to implement. And this was to me actually like the point at which I said, yeah, I think I need someone else to actually drive this, because I don't have a lot of capacity. So when it went to the implementation, I actually brought in someone else into the team at the sort of the principal level who had similar sort of experience as me, and then built a small team around him, and we actually created Pod 2. And again, like when it came to implementation, what we did was we actually built a team working together with the customer. It was not just Anthosa. It was Anthosa doing more of a facilitation role. And we are helping to uplift the the customer's team's capability, as well as doing what I call co-doing, right? And I think I want to put this differentiation, right? So a lot of the consultants have this approach of going into coaching when it comes to trying to get the teams to uplift their capability. But the way we work is actually a little different. We initially sort of do a lot of the leading ourselves and we do it. And then the next step is actually we do it alongside them. So it's just more co-doing. And then after that, actually, we let them do the leading and we sort of stay behind the scenes to guide and support, right? But the idea is essentially we build the customer's capability so that we don't create a dependency on us, and the customers can be standalone on themselves, and we can actually move on to the next customer. And that's the principle that we had. That's the philosophy we have, right? So we had the Anthosa Pod 2, right? So fast forward 4 years more, 3 years more, we actually not even 3 years, but when we created the 2 pods, we realized we were actually starting to run into some challenges ourselves internally. We needed to scale our processes and culture, right? So obviously between pod 1 and pod 2, we had customers that we were working with, which had a shared team culture with the customer for when it came to delivery. But when it comes to selling and managing the service offerings and the products and our internal processes, we wanted to actually have like shared internal processes. So we said, oh yeah, around invoicing, around HR, payroll, around accounting, we needed some shared platform. So Simone spoke about earlier shared services. So these are essentially our shared platforms that provide that shared services capability, right? And we put them in place, and at the time we had the second pod. And then we said, yes, in terms of the shared culture, there's also an element of shared culture internally within Anthosa, but at the same time, there's a shared team culture with the customer as well. We kind of made this separation at this point. We said the shared work culture is for Anthosa is essentially between the core leadership and the principal consultants that work with myself internally, right? But whereas when it comes to all the senior consultant that does the delivery, we told them, there's only one culture for them, and that's the customer's culture. They work alongside the customer's culture. They work alongside the customer's teams, and then that's their culture. That way, actually, we are able to reduce a lot of the cognitive load on the team members. And this actually enables them to have greater flexibility in terms of managing work-life balance. And also, it creates this focus on innovation that really allows them to go through and think about, oh yeah, the customer has a problem. How do we actually solve this problem for customer? But then do it in a way that it enables us to create a new service offering, right? So this way of working has actually really helped Anthosa to actually grow over the last 3 years. Right? And fast forward to today, what we have is a 25 strong team that's globally distributed. And because of the way we work and the way we operate using this platform operating model, it has allowed us to actually operate globally without any challenges, right? We have 5 sales partners, including myself, that can actually sell and deliver. And then we have 20 other strategic and human-centered design consultants that can actually support the customer delivery, right? And at the same time, we also work with about 15 plus additional principal consultants that come on based on demand for capacity-based work from time to time. And I should probably include that in here. So Simone spoke about ecosystems earlier. So one of the thinking that we have in Anthosa is also about this concept of building ecosystem. So we have 2 ecosystems that we created. One is around the product ecosystem that we created, so products that we implement for our customers. So for our product partners like AWS, Dynatrace, Databricks, Snowflakes, MongoDB, WSO2, these are actually part of our product portfolio partner ecosystem, right? And then we also work with the delivery, what I call the delivery partners, which are part of our delivery partner ecosystem. And organizations like ThoughtWorks or EPAM or Elaborate and Everest Engineering, these are actually part of our delivery partner ecosystem. The way we work with them is actually like sometimes when we do the strategy for customer, some of the strategies we don't have the capacity to deliver. So when we don't have the capacity to deliver, we tell them, look, there's a customer that wants this strategy implemented, but we don't have the capacity. Can you come and help us? And then we actually work with these partners. Or sometimes the customers might actually prefer to work with one of their own existing third-party partners themselves, right? So that's kind of our partner ecosystem. So, and what this has enabled is for us to actually create quite a nice portfolio of products or service offerings, if you want to use that term. So our first service offering was Innovation Strategy Accelerator, and then obviously shortly after we created the artificial intelligence strategy accelerator. And over the years, we created quite a few technology strategy accelerators for different organizations looking at creating different technology, adopting different technology platforms. But what we've also done is actually, some of the change that organizations need to drive around service management life cycle. We've actually created a service management design strategy accelerator and a funding model. We spoke about the funding model earlier. The funding model work that we did in the AI strategy and the innovation strategy, we actually took it out completely and created a separate service offering around it. So this funding models design strategy accelerator is something that organizations that are moving from a project-based funding model to a more product-based or value stream-based or innovation-based funding model, they can actually explore this funding model design accelerator as a standalone product from us, right? And then obviously the work that we are going to be talking about today is this operating model design strategy accelerator that we've created. But over the last year, we've actually developed 2 other new strategy accelerators. One of them is already announced, which is the digital transformation strategy accelerator. And then the last one is actually this customer strategy accelerator, which we haven't announced yet, but it's actually coming out of some of the work that we've done with one of the recent customers. Essentially, it's going to be looking at this holistic end-to-end customer life cycle from a marketing to selling to servicing and the customer retention, the full end-to-end customer journey of how our customers deal with an organization, and how this can be transformed to actually drive better growth for organizations in a more long-term and sustainable way. So essentially, if you look at it, these are kind of our products. If you look at the product thinking that Simone was talking about earlier. But how we've structured is, obviously we got the 5 pods that actually work close with the customers in terms of working with the customer. But then internally we have these shared internal processes around invoicing, and payments, HR and payroll, accounting, and obviously recently we've started implementing a CRM platform and also set up our own marketing capability. That's actually the team that's helped with a lot of the artifacts around promoting this event. Right, that's our marketing team that we're starting to build. And then obviously we have the shared culture and the shared IP. So shared IP is essentially all those service offerings that we've created that we can cross-sell across any of the pods. The pods actually don't own the service offerings. Service offerings are actually maintained at Anthosa level. Right? So that's all the shared IP we have. And then obviously we use collaboration tools across the board, across all the different pods. And these are pretty lightweight. We use Miro for more sort of collaborative visual engagement, and then we use Jira for task management, and then we use Slack for communications. And these are essentially our management tools that we use for most of the planning and execution work. And obviously, when the pods are working closely with the customer, they have this customer-facing tools that they're going to be using, right? And quite often this could be whatever the customer is using. Some of them would be using Teams, or some of them would be using Zoom, or some of them would be using Google Meets, right? Google Workspace, and whatever the customers are using. Our customer-facing teams will actually adopt that and work alongside them as part of their team. But more recently, we announced this shared delivery platform called Kaika Flow, which you can find out a little bit more about if you follow my profile or jump onto Anthosa's company page on LinkedIn. We're sharing about it. It's what we call an intelligent transformation platform, which we relaunched recently. But I probably don't have the time to cover it in detail. But we'll probably set up another event like this in the future to talk more about it. Right? And then obviously we have the customers. So that's how we're structured as an organization. Right? And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to put it into the Q&A. We'll try and answer them as we go. And at this point, I'll just move on to the transformation 2.0 and how you can actually use it to adopt the platform operating model for large organizations, right? And why did we create transformation 2.0, right? And I talk about this thing called the transformation mortality curve and the reasons why we created this methodology. If you look at the transformation initiative ideas generated as sort of like 100%, by the time it comes to concept validation, it goes down to about 75%, and then the feasibility studies goes down to about 50%, and then stakeholder alignment, it drops down to about 35%. So by the time the business case is approved, you've already gone down to about 25%, right? And the actual implementation is only about 10%, right? And what's worst is actually not this 25% that gets to business case, but also the fact that only about 30% of them really delivered outcomes. This is according to Bain, BCG, and McKinsey. all of which have done extensive research around it, and they've built a lot of capability around saying, yes, we can still continue to deliver these large transformation programs successfully. And it's a lie, by the way, but they'll tell you they can do it. But the statistics that they all found themselves prove that it's not true, because obviously only 30% deliver the outcomes. Right. And then obviously when they're internally led, this success rate goes down further. This goes down to about 12%, and this is according to HBR. Right. So if you really look at it, that's around 7.5% or less than 3% when it's internally led of transformation initiatives that are ideated that actually deliver the intended outcomes. Right. So to me, like this didn't seem like something that's acceptable. I'm always somebody who challenges the status quo, so I felt like we needed to do something differently to actually try and change this. So that's why we actually created Transformation 2.0. What we noticed was startup failure rates are actually quite similar, and their reasons are usually around market misfit, which is around 42% of the cases, and then lack of funding, which is around 29% of the cases. Right. And if you really look at it, why transformations fail, it's usually because of bureaucracy, right? And if you really look at why the startups fail, it's because due to lack of organizational strengths, right? So what's a good thing for large organizations, which is organizational strength, is actually a barrier for a small organization. But at the same time, what's good for a startup, which is ability to move quickly and implement things quicker, it's actually strength for a startup, but it doesn't really work in large organizations, right? Because of the bureaucracy. So what we thought was, what if we could actually combine the two thinking, right? And bring a methodology that balances innovation and stability, because a lot of the bureaucracy in large organizations is created around stability. So we wanted to actually explore how we can combine these two to bring stability and which is a strength for a large organization, and look at how you can drive innovation using startup-like methodology. So that's why we actually created this Transformation 2.0, right? So we thought about the transformation as a startup that's building inside a large organization. So initially we go through this initial stage, which we call the foundation, right? And then from there we go into seeding the eggs, which is kind of like looking at ideas, just looking at how do we want to try and think about what we want to pick up and run with. And then obviously we see a few things that sort of like starting to take legs. This we call watching the caterpillars crawl. And then once we've seen a few caterpillars get to the end point, then we say, yeah, actually it's time to build a case for change, because we know what we've been trying is working, and we want to try and actually transform the whole business based on what we've been doing, right? So this Transformation 2.0, we call it enabling human-centric innovation at scale, is actually what the philosophy is, right? And then if you look at how does this philosophy lend across to a methodology, right? So what we said was, we need to go through these 5 phases, 5 stages we call shape, discover, jumpstart, scale, and embed, right? Shape is where we do the leadership alignment, creating a vision and identifying outcomes. And then discover is where we are actually refining the vision, co-designing the strategy, and then identifying what are the different initiatives, right? This bit is actually quite common for most organizations. This is essentially that foundation that we need to set for anything, right? So we spoke about setting the foundation. The shape and discover is actually our step 0 of the setting the foundation, right? And then step 1 and 2, watching the seeding the eggs and watching the caterpillars grow. These are essentially the jump starts, that we call jump starts in the methodology, right? So we kick off initiatives, we validate assumptions, we refine the designs, we see how the design actually works, and then get some real feedback, right? And once we've done that, then we can actually refine these designs that we created and start to apply it at scale across the organization. But at the same time, during the scaling, we also look at, there are areas that has unique needs. If you think about applying platform operating model for a large organization, there'll be parts of the business where it doesn't really work. So we need to think about how do we actually tailor it to different parts of the business, right? So we do that tailoring in the scale phase of the Transformation 2.0 methodology. And then obviously once we've gone through scale and sort of put everything in place in the organization, then we need to look at, how do we evolve the product life cycle? How do we evolve the funding model? How do we evolve the governance across the organization as a whole, right? And then that's what we do in the embed. And the Kaika Flow platform that we actually mentioned earlier, is actually one of the tools that we introduce in this embed phase as well, right? So this is where the processes really become, tested, and we are ready to try and automate them using the platform. And so how has this actually, helped customers, right? So if you look at the 50 plus customers that we worked with in the last 6 years, more than 75% of them have achieved most of their transformation outcomes. And more than 60% of them have actually sustained the gains they achieved beyond 3 years, right? And almost 80% of the customers that we did the strategy has actually asked us to help them with the implementation. And we've actually served over 30 customers over the last 6 years. And obviously the team that we have globally distributed, 25 plus, we bring about 380 years of cumulative industry experience, right? And I think, to me, I think the key success factors are the top 3 things: the 50%, the 75% achieving most of the outcomes, and 60% being able to sustain the gains. Because what we do is we don't just transform, we actually help embed and make this part of the organization's DNA. And once it becomes actually their capability uplift happens, and then they can actually continue to operate the way we do. And that's, to me, is actually like really what I enjoy seeing the most, because it's not about us coming and changing, it's about actually us helping them to become better than what they used to be as we are walking away from them. So how do we actually use this to apply to the operating model design concept, right? So in the operating model design strategy accelerator, we have this visioning that we do, and after the vision we go into design, and then from design we go into test, refine, and scale, and then from design, test, refine, and scale, we get into embedding and operationalizing, right? So this, like in the vision, what we try to do is we try to identify a clear why for the organization. Why are they going through this change? What are their drivers? And then in the design, we analyze the business models and the value chains, and identify what's the ideal decomposition for the organization. If they're a large monolithic organization like Simone was talking about earlier, they can't just all of a sudden decide this is how they want to split. They need to look at how it spans across their business model, how it spans across their value chains, and then look at what's the best way to try and do the decomposition. So a lot of that is done in the design phase. And then obviously the test, refine, and scale is where we actually test, refine, and scale the operating model, so that we know what are the different nuances that we need to apply to different areas. And then obviously in the embed and operationalize, we do the embedding and embedding of the capability to be able to evolve the operating model. Because what we believe is, once we create this operating model and adopt it for a customer, it's not something that becomes static. It's something that needs to continually evolve. As the organization creates new products, they need to actually evolve the operating model to support that. And just moving on to the next slide. So how does this work across the shape, discover, jumpstart, scale, and embed, right? So the op model vision that we spoke about is what we do in the shape and discover, right? And then obviously when it comes to operating model design, I spoke about using the business model analysis and the value chain analysis work that we do. But at the same time, this is also where we look at 3O toolkits and look at applying 3O toolkit and the platform design toolkit to actually look at how we want to design the operating model, right? And then obviously the op model, test, and refine, again, we continue to use these tools. And when it comes to embedding and operationalizing, this is where we actually look at making sure that what we created has actually really been adopted by the customer, and then it becomes part of their DNA in terms of how they operate, right? So that's how we apply it across the methodology in terms of how we work with the platform of model and the transformation 2.0, right? And at this point, I know we're running a little bit over time. I'll probably take a pause and give anyone a chance to ask questions.
Do we have any questions? We don't seem to have any in the chat at the moment. I've got a quick question though. In regard to so we've said that bureaucracy is the thing that sort of binds up organizations and can be a real bottleneck. How do organizations know that they're leading into a space where they're kind of getting into the red zone and it's going to turn into trouble before they get there? Is there a way for them to identify this before the wheels start falling off?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Emma. I think I've spoken to you earlier about some of the different customer segments that we work with. So I think I spoke about the sort of the area that we call scale ups, which is kind of like organizations from 50 to 500 employees. And then the other one is what we call the mid to large, which is usually organizations that are between 5,000 to 10,000 employees. And then there's a whole bunch in the middle between about 500 employees to 5,000 employees, right? And the way these symptoms materialize for the organizations differ depending on whether they're a scale up or whether they are a mid-size or whether they are a mid to large. In a scale up, usually what you will see is by the time they become 50 employees, they've already got either one product that's starting to find product market fit, and they've got essentially 5 teams of 10, right? And there's one product that's actually starting to hit the product market fit and really starting to sort of take off, or they might have 1 or 2 products that they're starting to create and sort of test in the market with, right? So what you usually see when it hits that 5 teams mark is you see the pace of innovation really starting to slow down. So when you're like a smaller startup, you're really used to moving at pace. But when it becomes sort of like that 5 teams of 10 working alongside each other, there's a lot of friction that gets created, and the founders or the CEOs or the sort of the co-founders will really start to see, yeah, things are really starting to slow down. We're not building and shipping things as fast as we used to, right? And then this is probably the time that we either we get tapped by the CEOs or founders, or we get referred to them by one of the advisors or the non-executive directors they have on their board, right? and we sort of start a conversation. And on the other side, with the mid-size and mid to large, usually the symptom is
I love the word symptom, by the way. I think symptom's a great way of putting it. The symptoms that are shown in these organizations that aren't as potentially healthy as they want to be.
Yeah, I actually accidentally stumbled across, but going back to your original point around sort of like signals, yeah, it's usually they really struggle to drive change in the organization. So most of the initiatives will sort of start to fizzle out after about 3 to 6 months or a year, right? And they're really starting to see, like, none of the things that they start really take shape and sort of get adopted across the organization. A lot of the projects they start sort of get scrapped. There'll be a lot of
so they're not getting any traction
and money. Yeah, they're not getting any traction. That's usually the clear sign.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I can see that we don't seem to have any further questions on the in the Q&A at the moment. Chamara or Simone, do you have anything you want to add before we get into the giveaways?
No, not specifically. I mean, just mentioning that we have a lot of content on our website for people that want to dive deeper. There are lots of articles, so really encourage you to explore. There is a search box in the website.
You can search for more
info. Yeah.
Do you want to quickly give us your website address?
Yes, head to www.boundaryless.io. You will find all our methodologies downloadable. All the downloadable come with substantial guides that you can use. Plus, there is also a podcast that you can enjoy, and our blog, which is very, very, I would say, full of stuff. So you can look into that.
Excellent. Thank you. And Chamara, do you have anything you'd like to add before we hit the giveaways?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, what Simone mentioned about blogs is definitely something we do quite voraciously as well. If you go to the insights page on www.anthosa.com website, there's a whole heap of insights that we've published over the last few years, where you can find really interesting conversation topics around transformation and innovation and driving change in organizations. And also, if you follow us on LinkedIn, you'll see we have a lot of posts that we publish around some of the customer case studies and some of the insightful thinking that we have. And also we also have a newsletter on LinkedIn that you can subscribe to if you go to the Anthosa LinkedIn page, Anthosa Consulting LinkedIn page. And when it comes to podcasts, we don't have a podcast now, but it's actually something we're actively working on. And by the way, our podcast is going to be called Transformation 2.0. So it's going to be announced soon, but this is the first time.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. That's it. Yeah.
Cool. So there's lots and lots of content.
To go over. the closing remarks.
Yeah, so there seems to be loads of content. I mean, obviously lots of content in today's session. And then also on both of your websites, there's going to be a lot of information as well. So I'll encourage people who, if you do have questions, as Simone said, I love a search bar on a website. It makes it so much easier to be able to find the content you want. But check those things out. In regard to what else we have available, I'm just going to chuck it in the chat too for people who are online right now if they need those links directly. But we have a couple of offers for you today, and they include the first 10 people who email inquiries at anthosa.com have access to a really exciting Explore workshop, and that is a joint session between Anthosa and Boundaryless as a discovery call, and they're usually not for free. So if you want one of those, I'd jump on board really quickly because there aren't many available, and from what I've heard, they sound very full of resources and help and information, and might just get you started along the track you want to get started along. They're also free book giveaway. So Chamara's writing a book at the moment called The Definitive Guide to Digital Transformation, and that covers how to overcome challenges of digital transformation, technology modernization, and artificial intelligence adoption. So there's a bit in there. It's going to be released soon. But if that's something you think you'd like to read, then make sure you jump onto the Anthosa website. The link is there. It's also in the chat, and you can register for the book there. The toolkits that Simone mentioned, the 3.0 toolkit and the platform design kit, are also available from the Boundaryless website, but there are direct links there or also in the chat, and they're definitely worth checking out. They look pretty great. I'd like to deep dive into those a bit more. I know that. In regard to next steps, what else can you do? Well, we're going to continue to have these sorts of seminars or webinars. So make sure you know what's going on there. Email in regard to the Explore workshops if that's something you're interested in, because you only have 10 opportunities to take one of those up and speak to our wonderful Chamara and Simone. And you can also register for the on-demand viewing. So if there was something in today's workshop that you didn't quite grab or you need to re-listen to, register for the on-demand, and then you'll get a notification when it's up there, and you can just listen to it at your own leisure or fast forward to the things you want. Also within the chat, Chamara's added the links to the 3.0 toolkit and the platform design toolkit. I'm going to make sure I say that clearly. And they're both on Boundaryless's website, which is once again boundaryless.io. And as Simone said, they've got a great search function there, so you can just chuck in 3.0 or the PDT toolkit if you need to. Anyway, we're a little bit over, so we apologise. It wasn't the plan to be over today, but it was chock full of really very interesting and quite, I'd say, full information today. I know there was some points, as not being an expert in this field, I was like, whoa, that's pretty deep. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I'd like to thank our two speakers for today, and thank you for coming along, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a really wonderful day.
And thank you, Emma, for collaborating with us to co-host this event and being the MC for the event. Thank you again, and thank you, Simone, for your collaboration as well. And it's been a great pleasure to do the run through this session with you all, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you in the future as well. And for everyone that joined, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or by email, and we're more than happy to help you with any of your Explore workshops or anything else that you would like to talk about. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Have a lovely day.
Cheers. Bye. Backstage.